For this next step, you're going to need your assembled cape piece and you will need your hood piece. So here I have the cape in my main fabric and my hood in my main fabric, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them right sides together and clip in the two raw edges. But before I do that, I am going to need to fold my cape in half. A little bit slippery this satin backed fabric is, so grab a pin and I'm going to mark the exact center of the cape piece, and in marking the center it's going to tell me that this point is going to intersect with the exact center at the back of the base of the hood. So I'm just going to clip that in place. And continue onward. Continue clipping until I reach the end of the base of the hood. So this is for the left side of the hood, and remember you are clipping these right sides together. So now that I've done the left side, I'm going to continue with this, doing the same on the right side. You may need to, depending on the size that you're sewing, you may need to manipulate the fabric just a little bit. So I'm sewing a teeny size for my son. And of course the adult sizes, in the adult sizes there will be a lot more fabric, so you may not have to manipulate the curve that much. Not really a curve, it's more of an angle. So I have this all done up, and I'm going to go ahead and sew this in with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way from the edge of where the base of the hood meets the cape, right from there all the way across down to the center and stopping at where the right hand side base of the hood is. I'm going to do this for this piece, the main of my cape, and I'm going to repeat these steps for the lining of the cape as well. So in doing this you would have joined the main fabric to the hood piece and the lining fabric to the hood piece respectively. Right, so I have sewn this seam in. I thought I'd want to take a minute to talk about troubleshooting. Now this happens to me very often. Do you splay out a seam and only to have it come under the presser foot and have it bunched over to the other side? This happens to me so often, and you could do one of two things. You could either undo the entire seam in an effort to try and even out the bulk. What I do is I just usually put a little nick in the seam allowance, and just resume business as usual the way that can go, because this is not going to bulk up very much anyway. It's already in the seam, so it's done. I'm not going to open it up, but the choice is purely yours. If you want to open it up, that's fine, you can do it right now. In the Laura tutorial I have indicated a way that you can, a preventative step in which you can actually keep it open by pinning the seam, the ironed seam here and making sure that it stays open as it comes under the presser foot. If you choose not to do that, that's okay. You can go ahead and clip the seam allowance just a little bit, not all the way to the seam of course, just maybe 2/3 of the way, and it will still continue to lay flat except for where the seam is actually sewn. And another thing I want to mention is on the other side of the seam. So as you can see, I have sewn this in all the way from one end to the other as a straight 1/4 inch seam allowance. So as I was sewing, I realized that there's a little bit of detail here that I would like to cover. So In the earlier step, we have ironed this seam allowance open, the both side seams here on the cape, and what that means is this flap of seam allowance gets pushed down. If you want the hood piece to stay nice and firm and anchored, what you're going to have to do for this step in attaching the hood to the main is to flip this piece of seam allowance up and then sew it all the way across. So I'm going to show you what I mean with the lining piece now. Here's my cape lining, and I have sewn this in exactly as I have sewn in the main pieces, and I've ironed those seam allowances open. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here on the reverse side. So I'm looking at the wrong side of the cape lining now. And do you see this little bit that I have ironed downwards? Well, to attach the hood, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this upwards, just for the time being. And now I'm going to look for a center mark. So once again, fold it onto itself, grab your pin, and mark the center mark right there. So what I forgot to say when we did this the first time round is that that piece of that little seam allowance is supposed to be upwards, and that will help you hold the hood piece right down. So I'm going to zoom out as I show you how we will be attaching the lining of the hood to the lining of the cape. So once again, I've marked the center right there, and I've got the center seam of my hood laying right sides together. And to just clip or pin this right down, I'm going to leave a pin there just to leave it anchored. And just remember that because we've ironed it downwards, this seam will have the tendency to flap downwards, so just remember to coax it up just gently and continue pinning as we did previously right till the corner of the hood piece. And once again, this seam is 1/4 of an inch. I think most of the seams in this tutorial are 1/4 of an inch, so just remember, see, it's gone back down, so I'm just going to flap it upwards. And if it helps, you could just press it upwards just for with the iron just for this seam, and then later on you can press it back downwards to help the seam lay nice and flat. So once again, we're going to just sew this in with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance over at the your machine, and I'll meet you back here in a little bit. So just a quick look at the seam that we just sewed in. This is what it looks like from the top, and there we go. The little seam that we were talking about in the previous step, it's all lodged in over here. So you would have done your lining piece to the lining hood and the main piece to the main hood by now. So now we're going to talk about fastenings. This is the neck fastening pattern piece, and it says lining cut 2, so that's what I have right here, 2 of these pieces cut according to this pattern piece. And these fastening pieces go at the neck, so it gets attached to the hook and eye pieces that we will see in a little bit. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to fold it in half with right sides together, and we're going to sew down the long length and down one short end. Here we go, all sewn up. I'm just going to snip off the excess threads, and I've sewn just down the length of the raw edge here and one short end. So what I'm going to do next is just snip at a diagonal on that corner, being careful not to snip into my stitching lines here. And then I'm going to turn it the right side round. So once I've done that, you want to take the very tip of your chopstick and you want to just push it out so that you get your square corners, and then just feel about and make sure that the seam lies right at the edge over there. Remove any spare threads. Just run that chopstick one more time, push out the corners just so you get nice sharp edges. And and I'm happy with how this looks, and you're going to repeat that for the other neck fastening piece. Now that I've got both of these done, I'm going to run over to my ironing board, give them a little bit of a good press and a steam. When we come back, we're going to talk about how we're going to affix our hook and loop tape to both these pieces and then fix them onto the hood main. So here I have my two neck fastening pieces. I have pressed them nice and flat, and I have my hook and loop tape also cut in the same size as my neck fastening pieces. Now I'm using baby hook and loop tape or Velcro, and what this is just that it is a little bit softer, so it's suitable for very young children, you know, where they won't get hurt by the abrasion with the tape. And you can actually use either, if you can't get your hands on this, you could even use button closures at the neck, but we're following this according to the tutorial. You're going to attach both the pieces of the tape to the neck fastening pieces that we just sewed, and you could either sew them on, so just sew all around, leaving the raw edge that we've left open earlier for the loop unstitched, so sew on all four corners for both pieces. So some sewing machines don't like sewing through hook and loop tape and will skip stitches, so just try it out on a piece of scrap fabric, or you could use different types of needles to work and to try to sew it, to see which one works best for your sewing machine. Different machines react differently to these closures that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead to my sewing machine and sew on all three edges, leaving the raw edge unstitched. So I have sewn the hook and loop tape to my neck fastening piece, and as you can see, my hook and loop tape is just a little bit larger than my neck fastening piece. My hook and loop tape is about 3/4 of an inch, and when you sew down the neck fastening piece, it comes up to just slightly more than 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do, rather than to have it protruding out this way, is I'm going to just cut it down, and you can do that for your piece if you have the same issue. It's difficult finding the exact notions to fit your specifications sometimes, but there's just certain things that you can do to help your craft along. So again, I'm going to do the same thing for the other piece because there's a little bit of overhang on either side. Just going to trim that down to size, and it's perfect because it will not fray. So as you can see, we have sewn down all three edges and left one edge raw, the edge that was the opening to our loop. So I'm going to show you now how we can attach this to the front of your cape, and you will also need some of that elastic we spoke about at the beginning of the video. So we're going to show you how to make the finger loops at the bottom of the cape. So I've got my cape right here, and we're working on the main piece, so that's the front of the cape, and the area that we're going to focus on right now is this bit right here. So I've got my hook and loop tape attached to the neck fastenings, and this is the scratchy side and this is the loopy side. And what I want to do is I want to attach them with the raw edge lined up with the raw edge of the front of the cape, and I want to attach it such that the loop side, the side that is a little bit scratchy, that would be facing down, so that when the child wears it, it doesn't accidentally scratch against your skin or the child's skin as they are wearing it if it does come undone. So I'm going to clip that in right there, and on the other side, let me just reposition it just a little bit. It does get caught onto the fabric, so be careful while you're positioning it, because if you are using something that is very delicate, it could accidentally scratch your fabric. So that's on one side of the cape, and I'm going to flip right now to the other side. And once again, looking at the base of the hood, where the hood meets the front of the cape, that's where I want to put my other piece. So it's going to be, you're going to look for the raw edge So that's the raw edge right there. So just imagine this is going to flip out this way, and you're going to want to catch this way. So this is what's going to adhere together to hold the cape in place. So this gets affixed facing upwards. Just clip that in. This is what we're going to look at. This is what you're going to be seeing right now. One of the neck fastening pieces is going to be placed facing downwards, and that will be the scratchy piece, the one with the hooks, and the one with the loops, the neck fastening piece with the loops, is going to be facing upwards, such that when they're sewn in and in the final garment, it will intersect that way. I hope that makes sense. Now we're going to go over to our sewing machine and just sew these two in with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you'd want to go over it a couple of times back and forth just to reinforce it in place, because if your child's anything like mine, this cape's going to get loads of play. That's what we're hoping for. It's going to get loads of play, and it's going to be taken off and put on multiple times. You want this seam to be secure. Another seam that you want to be really secure is the elastic. So at the bottom of your cape, now you have the option of whether you want to affix the elastics down there. So I'm opting to have the elastic sewn in, and you want to fix this right here, about a 1/2 inch from the edge of from the hem of your cape. So just clip that down there, and the aim of this elastic is so that when the child is playing, he can loop it around, he or she can loop it around their wrist or wherever the cape comes up to, and flap their wings. So I'm going to affix these elastics on either side, and once again, just like with the neck fastening, you're going to want to double back on the seam that you're sewing a couple of times just to make sure that it is securely fastened and it won't come loose, because what we're going to be doing after this is affixing the lining, and then everything's going to be, all these seams are going to be put away from sight. So it will be very difficult to turn the garment inside out and reinforce the seams once you have done that. So what I'm going to do right now is go over to my sewing machine and sew 1, 2, 3, and 4 seams in with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure to go back and forth over them several times so they are fixed in securely. Go ahead and do that now. So that's done. I just want to show you what it looks like on the reverse side, and don't worry about these stitches because they will be covered when we fix in the lining in the next step. So right now, just go ahead if you want to and clip away the excess threads on both sides, and then you just want to go and grab your lining, and we're going to be fixing the lining to the main. So here I have my hood piece, and we are working on step 4 of the tutorial now. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take the big piece and I'm going to just pin it in place onto the hood because we will be sewing around it. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the neck fastening pieces as well as the elastic. Now what this does is just helps to make sure that it's not caught in any of the seams that we will be sewing in just a little bit. So all 5 of these pieces get nicely pinned away. So in step 4 of the tutorial, what we're going to be doing is getting the main and attaching the lining to it. If you would prefer for your feathers not to show, the feather stitch lines not to show on the lining side, what you can do instead of step 4 is to skip ahead to step 5 and to sew your feathers in. But I'm going to be doing step 4 first, and then I'll show you how to stitch the feathers in the step after this. So just to let you know that step 4 and 5 are interchangeable. You can do one ahead of the other depending on the final look. So we've got the main piece splayed out here. And what we're going to do is grab our lining piece. Both pieces have been nicely pressed. Now is a good time to give it a good press just to get out any of those stubborn creases before you actually sew the cape together, main with lining, because it will be difficult to get the cape to lay nice and flat after you have done this step. Cutting away any stray threads before we get started. And we will start with the base of the hood, where the hood meets the cape. And this is where we are going to put our first clip. Just clip that in. Do the same on the left side of the hood. I'm gonna remove my scissors out of there. I don't want to stitch my scissors into my cape. So now that you have clipped the base of your hood, go ahead and clip the rest of the hood in all around this outer curve here, and it should fit perfectly because it's based off of the same pattern piece. However, if you find that in working with the hood piece, the main hood piece, that you might have stretched it just a little bit, just take a little time to ease the lining into it. However, they are based off of the same pattern piece, so that should not be a problem. So go ahead and just clip these in right now. So now that we have clipped the hood in, what we're going to do is clip the straight edges of the sides of the cape, and then you're going to clip all around the outer curve of the cape. So it's worth a mention now that you clip all around except at the base of the cape where you would leave. Now I like to leave about 3 inches open, and what this serves as is a hole for you to turn the cape the right side out once you're done stitching. So we'll talk about that in a minute. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and take a minute to clip all around the edges of my curve, and I'll meet you right back here. So we're done with clipping the 2 raw edges of the cape and the lining, and they are right sides together. And I have put 2 extra large clips here at the base of my hem, and these are visual reminders to me to start my seam here and stop my seam here, because you want to leave a gap open for turning at a later stage. So what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is I want to stitch all around the edges, starting with this corner here. Go all around towards the hood, down the sides, and back here. Do not forget to back stitch to secure the seam, because you want the seam secured. I like to do a double back, so just 1, 2, 3, 4, and just because you're going to be putting a little bit of strain on that spot right there as you are turning everything inside out after you stitch. Now that we have sewn all around the outer corners of our cape, leaving a 3-inch gap at the bottom of the cape, you can go ahead and cut the edges of the curve with a pair of picking shears. I find what this helps to do is when you turn it to the right side, it just helps the cape to the curve to lay a little bit flat. If you choose not to do that, that's fine as well. I want to bring your attention to this little corner right here where the hood meets the side of the capes. So we're referring to this little corner right here, and if you want to grab your pair of scissors or your thread snips and just cut right into that corner such that you create a slit just till the seam line, but not through the stitches. And what this helps to do is it helps to open up that little corner right there, so it won't pucker when you turn it the right side round. So just go ahead and make that snip right now, and you'll need to do this on the other side as well. Let's just take a quick look at the bottom of the cape where your curved hem meets with the straight side. Just like we did previously, we're just going to cut this at a diagonal, and what this helps us do is it helps us achieve a sharper corner when we turn our cape the right side around. So there's a little bit of unsightly stitching over here. Don't worry, this is from where we reinforced our elastic loops, and that will be covered up when we turn the cape the right side out. Find the opening gap that you left earlier, reach in. And if you sewed a beak in place at the top of the hood earlier, you can just grab onto that and just try and slowly pull the right side of the cape out. If you did not sew the beak, then you can just grab onto the top of the hood and just pull out. Now do remember that you have inserted some pins to hold some things in place. So we have a pin to hold the beak in place, and we have a pin to hold the neck fastening in place, and as well for the elastic. So you just want to be careful as you are pulling your hood out to the right side, because you don't want to hurt your hands. I'm just being very careful right now and trying to locate that. There we go, here it is. So just remove that as you go along, and you want to do so for the right side, for the other side of the hood as well. So I'm just going to reach in to the corner of the cape and just grab a hold of that, minding the pin that is there. Remove that. And just remember that I've got one more pin somewhere here, and that's for my neck fastening right here. So what I want to do right now is, it's looking beautiful already. I'm loving the color contrast. I want to bring this over to my ironing board, and I just want to use a chopstick. Just, you can use the same turning hole that you left earlier. So just insert your chopstick in and just try and get a crisp edge on your corners and along the hem, and just do that until you feel you're happy with the look of it, and especially the corners. So just prod gently and make sure that you get a sharp corner at the edges over there. So I'm just going to run over to my ironing board and just iron these in place. Okie dokie, back from the ironing board, and I just want to make a little note as you're ironing. If you don't want your lining fabric to be seen from the right side, especially if you're not going to be affixing any of the feathers, you gently want to just roll the lining over and create a little bit of an extension of the main piece as you iron it. Also, because my fabric is a little bit suede-ish, I chose to iron from the lining side of the cape instead of from the top. And worth a mention is the opening hole that we have left earlier. So as you are ironing, as you are pressing your cape, you just want to make sure that you turn it in, that you're happy with how you've turned it in, and that you still have that little bit of a curve there. It will be a little bit tricky, but go ahead and take your time there, because it makes all of the difference. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to clip the opening closed. So it's about 3 inches wide, and I am going to just pop 3 clips here just to hold it in place. And what we're going to do next is to run over to our sewing machine, and we are going to top stitch the cape. So we're going to start, I like to start at the opening just so I'm a little bit careful, or if you want to start at any other spot, that's fine. It doesn't really matter being the top stitch. So I'm going to start with the edge of the opening and go all the way around the hem, up the sides, around the corners of the cape, the hood, pardon me, around the corners of the hood, down the other side, and round the hem back to where we started. So go ahead and do that now, and we will come back tomorrow to talk about how we're going to fix the feathers onto this cape.